Good morning, my dear friends. It is my pleasure to meet you again through this lesson. Today we are going to discuss about lesson number 19, Origin and Evolution of Life. Why we should study about the evolution or the past? We will get the better understanding of the present only when you know your past. So that is what we are going to discuss in this lesson. The first thing we will start is the origin of Earth itself, where we live. There were many theories proposed. This is how the universe is formed. So many people, so many suggestions, so many theories. But the most accepted one is the Big Bang theory. Of course, you would have heard this word, Big Bang. Bang, that means an explosion. So 15 billion years ago, there was a huge explosion. Due to this explosion, so many things scattered throughout the space, and these minute atoms and molecules, they started joining to form molecules and huge compounds. Like that was keep on happening. After the Big Bang happened, 10.5 billion years passed. That means 4.5 billion years ago, the earth was completely formed, and the life started forming in this earth just 500 million years ago. So regarding the formation of earth, the most accepted theory is the Big Bang theory. The earth, solar system, universe, galaxies, whatever it is, the most accepted theory is the Big Bang theory. But we will start looking into the evolution or the beginning of life in this earth. It was believed that 500 million years ago the life started. The single-celled minute aquatic organism started. There are various theories proposed saying that because millions of people, millions of theories. So we will study just 5 alone. We will just go through most accepted and mostly the people follow it, saying that it is correct. That alone we will follow. Let's look into them one by one. The first one is the special creation. This theory states that it's a kind of divine, a holy power was involved in the formation of life. Mostly it is religious. And it also states that after the origin of life, there was no evolution, no changes, everything is as such from the day one till today. That is what this theory talks about. The next one we are going to see is spontaneous generation or abiogenesis. According to this theories, the life started just spontaneously from a lifeless matters. So life just like that started from a lifeless organic matters. What type of examples? That mean fishes are originated from the mud. The insects are originated from the decaying parts. Frogs are originated from a moist soil. Such kind of belief, abiogenesis, is that life is started from something, there is no life. That is spontaneously. This is the theory, second one we have seen. Now looking at the third theory is called biogenesis. It was proposed by Louis Pasteur in the year 1862. It actually states life can be originated from a pre-existing living organism. And Louis Pasteur also gave an example that he kept a sterilized, that means completely germ-free flask that in a closed condition he kept it. And he found that there was no growth at all even after weeks or months of time. Also he said, if I open this one, also he said, if we keep the flask open, he could see microbial growth. That means life cannot start from no life. Instead, life can start only when there is a pre-existing life. That is what he stated. Coming to the next one, this is the most controversial, extraterrestrial cosmic origins. These people believe that a life spores of life were transferred from one planet to this planet. Most of the astronomers still believe in a cosmic origin or extraterrestrial origin of life forms. And the fifth one is chemical evolution of life. It was proposed by Oparin in the year 1922. In this theory of chemical evolution of life, they states that life evolved in this earth due to series of chemical reactions. Let's check them one by one in a quick manner. That after the Big Bang, this earth was formed, and 500 million years back, some series of organic molecules, they started combining accidentally. They came together. These type of organic molecules, they came closer and somehow they joined in chemical bonding. So existence of life started from a pre-existing chemical organic molecule composition. So accidental joint of organic molecules due to chemical reactions that started the life. This is the most accepted theory. After certain times, they started life in a single cell format inside aquatic man. These aquatic single celled organisms started slowly going for the evolution until we are today. This is all about the chemical evolution of life. In this lesson of Unit 19, Origin and Evolution of Life, we are going to discuss about how the life originated in the earth, and basic of that is the Big Bang theory. Of course, you could have studied that, but let us go through this in a quick manner. That means 15 billion years ago there was a big explosion that leads to the formation of different galaxies, universe and all these things. Because after the explosion, the gaseous things, they started coming closer to form molecules and compounds, and which will lead to formation of earth, galaxies and universe. And 4.5 billion years back the earth was formed, and that 500 million years ago the life started in earth. That is what the theories of that. And what are the other theories of origin of life? They are special creation, creation by God. Spontaneous creation, that means so all of a sudden from the wet mud the frogs came, and from the decaying things insects arised. These are some theories we are going to discuss. And biogenesis, the formation of living things from a pre-existing life alone. Extraterrestrial or cosmic origin. Still some of our scientists believe in extraterrestrial origin of human beings or life in the earth itself. And the last one is chemical evolution. Like I said here, the atoms come closer to form molecules, and these molecules somehow they made an organic compounds. These organic compounds somehow they joined to form, and at a certain combination they started as a life form, which is a single celled or something kind of virus. From that microbial organisms are started. From that microbial organisms, complex living organisms like us also evolved after the time of 500 million years of duration. This is what the introductory part of this unit 19. Okay, people are saying there is evolution. We all generated from a single cell organisms 500 million years ago. Some say from the extraterrestrial, some says God created. Okay, what are the evidence for the evolution? So by studying the similarities between different species and similarities, comparing the similarities with the extinct organisms, all these will make us give clear understanding about there was an evolution. These scientific terms of study of evolution we will see one by one. The scientific evidence of evolution. We will study the evidence from various aspects. The first one we are going to study about evolutionary evidences from the anatomy and morphology of living organisms. The first one is homologous organs. Homologous organs are organs, they have a common origin and a developmental pattern, and also shows a base similar structure. That means very organisms are present, some of them, but they are in a different species, but their particular homologous organs that shows different functions, of course, but their developmental pattern as well as the base structure of it are same. If you look at the example for homologous organs of this kind, the hand of a human is the front leg of a cat, the flippers of a whale, and the wings of a bat. These all belong to the class Mammalia. But this mammal shows the forelimbs, the hand, shows similar structures during their developmental, and the base structure also same. Of course, function is different because humans are using hand, whales are using the flippers for swimming, cats are using their forelimbs for grabbing some things and all. But these things, also the wing of a bat, if you look at the structure of all these things, they all look same. When they were in the embryonic stage of these animals, including human being, bat, whale, and a cat, during the embryonic stage, all this development will look similar. So this shows that the bat, human being, cat, and a whale, we all came from a common ancestor. So this is a proof of evolution by looking at the morphology and anatomy of animals. The next one we are going to see that analogous organs. What is the meaning of analogous organs? And organs, they look similar. They do the same functions, similar functions, but they have a different origin. If you look at this type of analogous organs, examples are, if you look at the wing of a bat, wing of a bird, and a wing of a dragonfly. If you look these, they look similar. They do the similar type of functions, but they don't have a common origin. Because bats belong to mammals, bird belong to class apes, these dragonfly belong to insects. So the organs that look similar and perform the similar actions, but these animals don't have a common ancestor. So such type of organs are called analogous organs. The next evidence of evolution is the vestigial organs. This is the third one after the homologous, analogous, and coming to the vestigial organs. Vestigial organs are non-functional, degenerated part of a living organism. It is still there, but it is degenerated, also it is non-functional. If you look at the case of human being itself, we have examples for this type of vestigial organs. The examples are vermiform appendix we have, which is a non-functional part inside our body, and the second vestigial organ in our human being itself is the nictitating membrane. That means next to the corner of this eyelid, where the two eyelids are joining, you can see a minute projection of flesh. This is similar, it's a degenerative membrane. If you look at some animals like crocodile, you could have seen that apart from their eyelids, they have one more membrane going, closing and opening inside the eyelids, covering the eyeballs. So that membrane was degenerated inside us. So that organ is also a vestigial organ. We have no actual purpose for that. And if you look at the next example, or in the human being itself, is caudal vertebra, coccyx, etc. These are the last part of the spinal cord, which was supposed to be a tail. So looking at this aspect, we can say that we all evolved from a monkey type of organisms. So this is how the vestigial organs present in the human being itself says, once we had a common ancestor with an alligator, or once we had a common ancestor with the monkeys, or these are the evidence. Our vestigial organs also saying the evidences of evolution in human being. What we have discussed is the evolution and theories. What are the evidences of evolution if you look at scientific methods? Let's start with the morphological and anatomical evidence for the evolution. If you look at that, the first one is called homologous organs. For example, if you look at the human hand, the wing of a bat and the flippers of a whale, all these look similar in their structure and embryonic development. Of course, they perform different functions. They are called homologous organs. Common ancestors, similar development pattern in the embryo, basic structure, everything same, but they are different for their functions. And coming to the next one, analogous organs. The organs, they look similar in structure, performs a similar type of functions, but they have a different ancestors. And during their embryonic development, they show different patterns. They are not at all common. Example, if you look at the wing of a dragonfly and a wing of a bat and wing of a bird, they all are doing the same function to fly. Structurally, they are similar, but if you look at their structure and their developmental pattern, they all are different, because bats belong to mammals, birds belong to aves. Coming to the next evidence, morphological anatomical evidence, the third one is vestigial organs. What is the meaning of vestigial organ? That means degenerated or non-functional organs present inside the living organism's body is called vestigial organs. Even human being also have vestigial organs. If you look at that examples, appendix, vermiform appendix, that has no role inside our body. Whereas the next one is nictitating membrane. That means if you look at the corner of your eyelid, you have a mass of tissues which are not at all useful. But whereas if you look at the nictitating membrane of alligators and all, apart from their eyelids, they can close one membrane also, that is called nictitating membranes. And caudal vertebrae and coccyx are the last part of our vertebral column which are degenerated, expecting that in our ancestors were having a tail kind of things. And if you look at the next evidence from this anatomy and morphology, is called atavism. If you look at the fourth anatomical evidence for evolution is atavism. What is the meaning of atavism? The reappearance of ancestral characters is called atavism. Example, if you could have seen that it is a very rare case, some minute tail-like projection in a newborn babies, in later stages of development it will go, and excess hair in their body while birth, but during the developmental stage it will go. So atavism says it is all practically possible that ancestral characters will reappear in some of their developmental stage. But the organism, when it completes their growth, all those things will disappear. So such a property is called atavism. So far we have seen the anatomical evidences of evolution. Let's look into the next one. Evidences from embryology. So you know that during the development an embryo will be formed by the fusion of a male and female gametes. But this embryo, when they keep growing, the pattern of growth of human embryo, the pattern of another animals we will compare, and you will find that the most of them are similar. If you look at an example of this, the developmental stages of an embryo of a fish and the mammals almost look similar. The developmental pattern of embryo. In the embryonic study of organisms, biogenetic law or recapitulation theory. This was proposed by a scientist named Ernest Haeckel. According to his theory, ontogeny recapitulates the phylogeny. Meaning of that is ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny is that during the development of an animal, it repeats the evolutionary stages of that particular organism, and thus it repeats the entire history of that particular race itself, that particular species itself. So during this embryonic development of each animal, every stage will resemble the evolutionary history of that particular organism itself. That is the meaning of it. Next one, we are going to look into the evidences from paleontology. Paleontology is the study of fossils. You know what is the meaning of a fossil? The dead remaining impressions of organisms which was lived a long years back. Leonardo da Vinci is called the father of paleontology. The study of fossils will help us how a small organisms it will gradually develop into a complex and big sized organisms. The live example of the paleontology that helps us to learn the evolution studies. Also it acts as an evidence. It is a fossil bird called as Archaeopteryx. This Archaeopteryx bird acts as a connecting link between the birds and reptiles. If you look at this fossil bird, this shows the character of both the reptiles as well as the birds. This Archaeopteryx has wings, feathered body like a bird. Also this bird had shown the characters of reptiles like clawed digits, long tail, conical teeth. You know very well these are the characters of a reptile. So let me conclude this one. Archaeopteryx is a fossil bird that we take it as an evidence that we have gone through an evolution. That this bird, fossil bird, Archaeopteryx, acts as a connecting link between reptiles and birds. So we can predict that both these birds as well as reptiles once they had a common ancestor. This is an evidence from the paleontology. So far we have seen the evidences of evolution: homologous, analogous organs, vestigial organs, evidences from embryology and evidences from paleontology. Atavism is nothing but the reappearance of ancestral characters. Example, a newborn child may have a small tail-like appearance, the back of their body, the end of the spinal cord. Also, huge quantity of hair in their body when the children is born, and quantity of hair growth throughout the body is also a reappearance of ancestral characters. But during the development of that particular human being, all those characters will disappear. But only during the birth time, you may notice an extra tail-like structure, some cases, and extra hair growth throughout the body. So coming to the next evidences from the embryology, and it says that there is a biogenic law or recapitulation theory. What it states is ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny, meaning the stages of development of an embryo, it will go and repeat the evolutionary history of the entire race of the animal. If you look at the embryonic development of a fish and embryonic development of a human, the stages, if you align the photograph, it will look so similar. This is an evidence state that both fish and human being came from a common ancestor from a long time back. And coming to the next one, evidences from the paleontology, study of fossils. And this one, a bird like dinosaurs, Jurassic time, there's a bird like, we found a fossil, we named the Archaeopteryx. It is a combination of both reptile as well as a bird, because it can fly, it has feather and wings, everything. It also shows the characters of reptiles like a corned teeth, long tail and a clawed digits. All these were the combination of the characters of both reptiles and bird. So we can conclude that Archaeopteryx is a connecting link, a common ancestor for both reptiles and a bird. This is an evidence from the paleontology. Let's look into the next one. Let's look into some of the theories which are most popular regarding this evolution. They are Lamarckism and Darwinism. Let's see them one by one. The first theory of evolution is proposed by a French naturalist Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. That is his name. He was a naturalist and he published his theory called Lamarckism in a journal called Philosophique Zoologique in the year 1809. This theory is also called as the theory of inheritance of acquired character, or generally called as Lamarckism. Commonly this theory was called as use and disuse theory, or Lamarckism, or inheritance of acquired characters. These are the different names of his theory, and generally we call it as Lamarckism. And what he said in his theory is, the first one is internal vital force. In this he says living organisms will always tend to increase its size. This is the first principle you should understand in the case of Lamarckism. And the next one is environment and new needs. That is, in that he says the change in the environment, maybe a food habit or availability or non-availability of the regular food, so many environmental character, temperature change, so many things will make the organism to go for an adaptive method towards that particular change. So whichever organ is used during that time, it may be developed. That is the second point. And coming to the third one, use and disuse theory. The organ which is used for extra time or extra work may develop well. In the opposite case, let's say due to the environmental change, a particular organ is stopped using or the usage become very less. In that case, this particular organ will be degenerated. This is called use and disuse theory. That means, in simple words, to make an adaptation with the environment, if there is a excess work for a particular organ inside this particular organism's body, that will develop well, whereas if there is no use for a particular organ, that organ will degenerate. This is the third point of Lamarckism. And coming to the fourth point of Lamarckism is the theory of inheritance of the acquired characters. Inheritance, the word means it's something that is inherited to passed on to the next generation, to the next generation, to the next generation, like that. Something is transferred, that is called inheritance. And this fourth one says, look at the third one, that the organs which are used excess will be developed in that particular organism. And the fourth point he says, that particular character will be given to the next generation. Inheritance of acquired characters. So from that generation to the next generation. So if you look at after 10 generations of that particular organism, the first generation and 10th generation will have a huge difference. This makes evolution. That is what he concluded. Let me conclude this Lamarckism one more time. Internal vital force to keep growing, environmental factors and adaptations, use and disuse theory, and inheritance of the acquired character because of the use and disuse. So these points he stated that evolution happens by this method. If you look at the next theory in the evolution is called Darwinism. It is also called as theory of natural selection. This was proposed by Charles Darwin, a British personnel and a naturalist. During his college days, he got a wonderful opportunity that take a voyage, exploration for 5 years. That means take a ship, go for a round around the world. So during his 5-year travel in a ship to various places, he had made a note of difference of plants, animals, so many data he collected. And he worked in that particular data for coming 20 years and he published a theory of natural selection for evolution. This is the most accepted theory which you are going to study, that it is very important also. Whereas theory of Lamarckism is rejected because of simple case. Look at a fellow who regularly visit a gymnasium and he got huge muscles, and is it practically possible that his newborn boy child also has the same muscles on his body? No, it is not possible. So, acquired character like a increased muscle size will not be passed to the next generation, will not be transferred. That is why the Darwinism is mostly accepted throughout this world. And he got this wonderful opportunity in a ship named HMS Beagle. And he made studies on his observations. For 20 years, he published his theory in a book named Origin of Species in the year 1859. Darwinism is also called as the theory of natural evolution. How come the nature itself makes the evolution? Step by step we will see that. The first point is overproduction. The high reproductive capacity of every species will lead to too many members of that particular species on earth. At that condition, there will be a struggle for existence because too many members and less food, too many members, lack of place to live. So all these things will make a struggle for the existence. That's the second point. This struggle for existence may happen intraspecific or interspecific. That means between the members of the same species or between the species itself. So there will be a competition for food, shelter and all these things. These struggles, intraspecific, interspecific and environmental struggle for an existence will make the animals or the organisms to go for slight variation in their genetic makeup. These variations may sometimes lead to evolution because due to the struggle for existence, they may have, let's say for an example, the animals used to eat only the plants, slightly changed into start eating the egg of other animals also. Due to there is no lack of food, so they made slight variation in their diet. This is a silly example I wanted to communicate so that you understand. So such a way, minute changes in their genetical level, sometimes a favorable variation may happen. That means towards the brighter side of that particular organism's life. Sometimes these variations may lead to an unfavorable condition. That means that itself will be a dangerous for. Already this animal is in danger condition. It is struggling for existence, but some variation happen which is unfavorable. So these animals will die. But the animals that got a favorable variations, that means a favorable side of genetical alteration will lead to a new species. So this type of genetic alterations are happening by nature itself. That is a point you should remember. So the nature itself selecting the favorable ones that is going to adapt to the new conditions, which is called natural selection or survival of the fittest. There were so many organisms were there. There was a problem. Some of them has shown a favorable adaptations. They all live favorable conditions. Genetic alterations will go to the next generation. It will be keep on passing to the upcoming generations. Now look at this. This type of favorable conditions will be keep on accumulating in an organism generation after generation. So after a long time of processing, so many variations which are favorable towards an organism will lead to a new species itself will be formed. It is called natural selection and leads to evolution. The next one we are going to discuss is the theories of evolution. If you look at the theories of evolution, we are discussing only two. One was Lamarckism, next one is Darwinism. In this theory, John Baptist Lamarck, according to him, the evolution happens in such a way that internal vital force will be the initiation. That every species will have their own internal urge to keep enlarging its size. So due to the environmental and new needs will arise. They will slightly change. These slight changes leads to excess usage of an organ or no usage or less usage of an organ. And he says that use and disuse will makes whatever the organs we use, that will be enlarging its size. Whatever organs we don't use, that will reduce in its size. And at such cases, inheritance of, let's say this organ is, some organ is due to the excess usage, it is increased in size, some other organs are decreased in this size because lack of usage or no usage. This will be inherited, passed to the next generation, that so that the next generation will also have the increased same organ in an increased size, another organ which is in no organ will be present or very decreased in size. But this is not practically possible. Coming to the Darwin, he is a British person and naturalist. He travelled in his ship called HMS Beagle for around 5 years throughout the world. So he has collected so many data. He collected and processed that data for the coming 20 years and he published Origin of Species, a journal, in the year 1859, his theory. It is called Theory of Natural Selection, or we call it as Darwinism. He says that due to the overproduction, reproductive capacity of a particular species, number of the members will increase in that particular species. That will make there a struggle for food, shelter and all these things. This struggle for existence happens for the case of intra-species among themselves or between other living or in between other living organisms or with the environment itself due to change in temperature and all these things, natural calamities like that. These things make slight variations in their genetic makeup to adapt to the particular change in environment or competition between them. An example for struggle for existence, if you look that, let's say the animal is completely herbivorous animal, due to extreme drought conditions, all the plants and leaves are gone. Now it has to live by eating something else, a flesh of other animal or an egg, at least an egg of another animal. It should have a protein digesting enzymes in the stomach so that it can survive. Let's say out of 1,000 animals of that species, one have, by mistake, they have some enzymes produced inside their stomach to digest the protein. 1,000, this one alone will survive, whereas the remaining animals in that particular area of that particular species will die. So that is an example of struggle for existence and variations. These successful variations makes the survival of that particular animal, that is called survival of the fittest. Let's say that organism is survived, and in a generation after generation, this kind of favorable variations are keep on accumulating on a particular species. Let's say after 10 generations, if you look at the first one and the 10th generation, they will show a huge difference, and that leads to origin of a new species. We have discussed a point called variation, that is not a physical enlargement of or degeneration of a tissue or an organ, instead genetical variation. How come it is happening? That is a point you should understand to learn the Darwinism properly. How come this science authentically supports the Darwinism? Reason is the variations. How come the variations are happening? That is the next point we are going to discuss. This is the key point in the Darwinism itself for evolution. Let's start the word variation with an example that we are familiar with. If you look at every human being, their fingerprint is different. How come it is possible? Every human being have 46 set of chromosomes. We all are human beings, belong to a same species. Then how come we all have a different fingerprint? That is something called variation among the species itself. How come this is happening? If you look at the biological aspects behind this, you have studied the sexual reproduction in human beings or any other organisms. What will happen? The gametes will be formed with a half set of chromosomes. These gametes, once it is fusing to form a zygote, different characters are getting fused, one from the mother and one from the father. This genetic mixing up will bring new varieties. A variation happens in that. That is why no daughter looks similar to a mother, or no son looks similar as a father. Also, this slight variations in the genetic recombination makes us unique in color, fingerprint, height, and this variation is the key aspect of genetical evolution. Variation is the key aspect that leads to variations. These variations leads to evolution. And if you look at the types of variations that happens in living organisms, they are somatic variations and germinal variations. The somatic variations are the variations happens in the living cells genetic makeup only in the somatic cells, except the reproductive cell. All the other cells are called somatic cells. So this type of slight changes due to the environmental condition will not be passed to the next generation. They are not inheritable. And coming to the germinal variations, the genetical slight variations happening inside the germ cells are called germinal variations. These germinal variations, once they form into a gametes will fuse with another gamete to form an embryo. That brings the changes. So variation happens in the germ cells will be inherited to the next generation. Two more classification is there for the variations. They are continuous variation and a discontinuous variation. The first one, continuous variation, is nothing but a gradual happening of slight variations that is keep on happening in a population of a same species, which will lead to minute changes in the organisms, which will be inherited also. It is keep on happening throughout the population. This leads to the variation of people, that they will show different varieties of skin color, the iris combinations, fingerprint combinations, the height, skin color, all these of the results of continuous variations. Whereas the discontinuous variations is a mutation that is suddenly happening. Example, in a human being, sometimes they may have an extra finger, or in the case of sheep, a short-legged ankles, etc. Let's look into the word variation. Variations are actually happening in the case of sexual reproduction, that is, male and female gametes are fused together to form an embryo. In that case, recombination of the genes, that means the gene for the skin color, for example, half part of the gene, half set of the gene will come from the mother, half set will come from the father to form a complete alleles of a gene. So at this case, several recombinations are possible, makes the skin color different from individual to individual. These recombination of genes are making the fingerprint is unique for every person. The iris, all these are unique for individual persons. If you look at the types of variation, there are two, somatic and germinal. In the case of somatic cells are the cells apart from the reproductive cells, all other cells are called somatic cells. So the variation happens in the somatic cells is called somatic variation, that will not be inherited to the next generation. If you look at the next one, germinal cells, if there is a change, a variation is there, that will be inherited to the next generation. And coming to the another type, considering whether it is a continuous or discontinuous one. Continuous variation is nothing but throughout the generations, the slight variations are keep on happening, that will lead to evolution. That means the different skin color, height, hair color, all these will be the result of continuous variation. If you look at the discontinuous variation, it is suddenly happening, like another extra fingers on the human beings. All these are sudden but discontinuous variation that will not be, or mostly it will not lead to inheritance or evolution, but this continuous variation leads to evolution. And there will be a slight confusion that what is the difference between a mutation, that is also a change in DNA, variation, that is also a change in DNA. What is the difference between mutation and variation? If you look at the words, mutation, that is actually an errors happening in the genetic combination or the DNA structure, which may be favorable or non-favorable, that depends. But variation is different combinations that happens in the sexual reproduction is called variations. Mutation is not like that. Mutation can happen independently due to exposure of chemicals, ultraviolet or something, that will make the errors or damage in the genetic structure. So that is the difference between mutation and variation. And like I always used to say, stay safe and stay healthy. Don't forget to take vitamin C and D rich food items, and see you in the next video. Until then, stay safe and stay home.